Okay, cool. Yeah, that just finance just holds a lot of things, a lot of trauma for us that show up in different ways. And today's speakers too, just want to recognize that we don't have any Black folks coming in to speak about finance today. Just want to just give that heads up. And that's mostly because the folks that we reached out to, one was Shared Capital Cooperative, which is a local cooperative. It's a local cooperative funder that funds co-ops nationally. And then in the afternoon, we're having Christina Nicholson from Nexus, who's a cooperative financer, who'll be talking more about like the local fund, an initiative from the city of St. Paul, that's like 2.5 million that will be funding cooperatives. So just recognizing that we did not build space to have like BIPOC speakers today. We do have white speakers, and maybe one that is multiracial. And so just making sure that I give that warning or give that heads up before we start. And like I said, it's because it's a local funder that works nationally strictly for cooperatives. And one being that they're going to be talking about the local fund, which is a work from Nexus with the city of St. Paul. But before we get started, we're going to go into some grounding, just recognizing that this is a hard topic. So I'm going to pass it to Liana.
Okay. I do want to ask, are we going to pause recording so we're not showing the grounding? I guess that's a quick question I have. We are going to have that on the
Yeah,
recording.
can we have the grounding,
Okay.
but like when people reflect their own stuff, just pause there.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So next we are going to move into this grounding and reflection. This was part of the Black Wealth Community Education Series that the Open Road Fund has been hosting. This particular session is called The Financial Wellbeing, Exploring Trauma and Triumphs Around Money Habits. So we felt like this would be a good way to kind of center our time, ground our time as we enter the session today. And it is led by Black folks in the financial wellness industry. So we thought that could be helpful. So I'm going to transition us into that now.
I want to take us through a grounding exercise. So I will ask you wherever you are to sit up straight. Place your feet on the ground if you can. Close your eyes if you feel safe in the space that you're in. And I want you to breathe with me. We're going to take a big breath in and blow it out. So big breath in. Another big breath in. And one more big breath in. Now you can keep your eyes closed as I take you through a reflection exercise. And the purpose of this exercise is to understand how family and past experiences shape our perspectives on money. So with your eyes closed, I want you to visualize a scene from your childhood related to money. I want you to visualize a scene from your childhood related to money. And I'll give you about 30 seconds of silence as that scene presents itself. Now, once you get that scene in your mind, I want you to reflect on your emotions, the conversations and events surrounding that memory. Do you feel it in your body? If so, where? As you think about that memory, maybe you feel it in your chest or your head or your gut. If you do feel that memory somewhere in your body, I want you to remember that for later. Now I want you to breathe with me again 2 more times. Breathe in. Breathe in. Now I want you to get some pen and paper, and I want you to jot down your thoughts and feelings around the childhood money-related event that you visualized. Jot down your thoughts and feelings around the childhood money-related event that you visualized. And if you felt it in your body, you can explore what that means for you and how you want to feel in the future. As you continue to jot down your thoughts and feelings around that childhood memory, I want you to also explore a few questions. Now, you may want to write these questions down so that you can revisit them after this webinar. The first question is, what was the atmosphere surrounding money in your family? What was the atmosphere surrounding money in your family? The second question, were there specific financial struggles or successes in your family? Were there specific financial struggles or successes in your family? Third question, how did your family discuss or avoid discussions around money? How did your family discuss or avoid discussions around money? And so I'm going to give you a little bit of time as you jot down those feelings and explore those questions. Give you about 30 more seconds to jot down those feelings and thoughts as it relates to your childhood money memory and as it relates to the questions, the 3 questions that I raised. Now, what I would like for you to do is write down one money belief that you may have identified in yourself or your family during the reflection session. If you identified a money belief that you have or your family has during that reflection session, I want you to write that down. And if you did identify a money belief, you can ask yourself, where did that belief come from? And how has it shaped your financial habits? Where did that belief come from? How has it shaped your financial habits? And as you identified that belief, were there any surprises that came up for you as you identified it? And if you did identify a belief, do you recognize it as a pattern in your family? And I allow you a little more time to think about that. Now, I want you to think about where you are currently as it relates to your finances. Are you currently having any challenges, or are you in a good place? Where are you currently as it relates to your finances? And if you did identify a financial habit, is it serving you in a positive way? During the childhood reflection, if you identified a financial habit, is it serving you in a positive way? Give you another 30 seconds or so to jot that down. And the last thing I will actually ask you to do in this section of the webinar is to write down your vision of where you want to see yourself financially in the next 6 months, 1 year, and 3 years. And make sure that as you're writing down that vision, it's going to positively serve you. I'll allow you about another minute for that piece. I know we don't have a whole lot of time to spend on this, but I think it's good that we're going through this process. And as you finish writing, I want to just say that I know this can be a heavy exercise for some. And we don't have all the time that we want to dig deeper tonight, but I wanted to make sure to create some space for you to begin this part of your financial wellness journey if you have not already. You can use that reflection exercise at home and continue to explore those questions that you wrote down. And know this is a personal journey. As you do this work, you will continue to make new discoveries. Thank you for indulging me with the first section of this webinar. As we segue into the
All right. Thank you.
All right. Morning, y'all. Morning. Thanks for joining us. Oh, sorry, Liana, may you please make them co-host?
Yes, I can do that.
co-hosting. All right. This morning we're joined by Shared Capital Cooperative to help talk about cooperatives and financing. We've been in the space with Shared Co-op for a while now. They're local to Minnesota, but do national funding and have been really doing some incredible work, especially in the BIPOC community, and giving more access to loans for cooperatives and some incredible work happening in the South. I won't go too much into it because I don't know it fully, but I'll just introduce our first speaker, and then Liana will introduce our second speaker, and we'll give them the space. And so I'll introduce Mark Fick. Mark is the Senior Loan Officer with Shared Capital Cooperative, where he works with business development, loan underwriting, and portfolio management functions of the organization. As a cooperatively owned loan fund, Shared Capital works to build economic democracy by providing financing to cooperative enterprises through the United States, including consumer, worker, and producer-owned cooperatives. Prior to joining Shared Capital, Mark was the Director of Lending Operations with the Chicago Community Loan Fund, where he was responsible for providing financing and technical assistance to affordable housing, social enterprises, and community-based organizations in the Chicagoland area. Over the past 30 years, Mark has been an active leader in a variety of community-based and cooperative development organizations with a focus on building economic systems that are democratic and radically inclusive. This includes serving in volunteer leadership and advisory roles with the Partnership in Property Commercial Land Trust, Black Lives Unitarian Universalism, and the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, the Chicago Mutual Housing Network, NASCO Development Services, organizations for the Northeast, and the Northside Community Federal Credit Union. So thanks for having us, Mark. A lot of work, a lot of really incredible work with you, but yeah.
Now I'll be introducing Esther West. Esther West joined Shared Capital as a loan officer in autumn 2022. They underwrite, support cooperatives in navigating the loan process, and connect cooperatives to resources. Esther has nearly 2 decades of cooperative and community-rooted experiences. She was a worker owner at Equal Exchange and the Ajani Group, has researched and mapped cooperatives with Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nembhard, and as a cooperative development specialist at the University of Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives, and has been on the boards of the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, MadWork, and Listen Up Youth Media. They have a BA from Xavier University, as well as 2 master's degrees from Cleveland State University in Environmental Studies and Urban Planning, Design and Development, as well as a master's GIS certificate. She has also conducted urban planning and trails analysis, recently taught environmental studies at San Francisco State University, and works on climate justice issues. Welcome, Esther. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate having you here.
Thank you.
And we'll turn it over to both of you all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for having us today. I'm going to pull up our slide deck here, so hopefully everybody can see that. I just sort of style and format, let you know that we are covering about 5 hours worth of material in about 40 minutes here. So we're going to kind of move really steadily and quickly through the materials themselves and the slides. But we do really encourage conversation and question and dialogue along the way. We will do our best to save as much time as possible at the end for more conversation and questions as well. So want to really be here to provide the information that you are looking for. So if we're slightly off of that, we want to make sure we're getting you what you need. I will say style-wise as well, as a presenter, you should do whatever you feel comfortable with, but I do always appreciate if people can have their screen on or their cameras on so that I feel like I'm talking to a group of people rather than a brick wall. But you need to do what you need to do to be comfortable in your space. So I appreciate your decisions there. Today we're talking obviously about financing cooperatives and hopefully financing your cooperatives that are in the works or under development at various stages. we already kind of had ourselves introduced, and we'll talk a little bit more about shared capital in a few slides and the work we do. But really want to make sure that what we're covering today is what you're looking for. Again, at the highest level, we hope that you can leave this presentation with a basic understanding of how lenders and investors make their decisions and how they think they approach their relationship to investing in your cooperative and your community enterprise. And really sort of buried in that is an understanding that things do not work well in the broader economy in the United States and globally. And that's the reason we turn to these models. I know you all have had conversations around that concept and have been spending a lot of space in there. That's a part of your fellowship program. And we want to hopefully present a different way of thinking about investing, a different way of how that relationship can work between investors and the cooperatives that are using the capital that they have. I'll try to do quick asides for some of the groups that are highlighted in our slides. These are all members and borrowers of Shared Capital Cooperative. Federation of Southern Cooperatives is a 50-year-old network of Black-owned agricultural cooperatives across the South of the United States. And we've worked with them for many years to help support the broader organization, as well as individual members that are a part of that group. I understand you may have been spending some time already on kind of this concept, but I would love to hear from you all, at least just a few minutes up front, for anybody that's willing to share, to kind of think back through your life and your experiences with money or credit, and your how you have related to that, what that has meant for you, and how that may have changed for the better or for worse over time, and to try to sort of set this groundwork of this is where we're starting and how do we move to a better space and a better process going forward. So just to take a few minutes, and anybody who might be willing to share some of their personal experiences or stories from their life, would love to hear kind of maybe as a child how you thought about money, as you grew older, as a young adult, how your experiences of trying to access capital and as you've moved through life, how that may have changed. So I'll just pause for a moment and would love to hear from folks if they have thoughts or comments.
Even some takeaways from the last, session. I think you were all doing a grounding exercise. So, something that you got insight on or thought about.
This is Tia. I was thinking that when I think of money and trying to gain access to capital, I think of gatekeeping, roadblocks, and not meeting the criteria.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for those thoughts. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Anika. I initially I didn't get a chance to share earlier, but just kind of like my early childhood or memories of money. Like I grew up, my parents owned a grocery store, and like I had a family of business owners. So like I back then just felt like kind of money was abundance, but realizing how they were brick and mortars and they really had a bootstrap. And although they did acquire and own their buildings, they didn't have a management plan or like not recession plan. What's the word? Succession plan. Yeah, succession plan. So, in the time of financial crisis or finding out that they didn't even have like they didn't have a loan or credit, I mean, the flip side is it's good that they had 100% equity, but they didn't have that relationship with the banks, most likely was redlined and probably didn't, due to racism, didn't have those relationships. But now I'm in a place of wanting to gain equity, have those like great relationships with financial institutions, leverage different type of capital that's available. So that's my experience.
Thank you. Anyone else? Maybe one or two more comments or thoughts?
Um, Hi, my name is Edmonds. I would say early memories. I grew up in New York in the hood, so the money was available enough to survive and to live. But then when I got older and started working at the bank, it helped me to gain more knowledge on financial literacy. But then I learned I had to go deeper than just knowledge and just reprogramming my thoughts and beliefs around money. So it's one thing to get the knowledge, but then like working through those beliefs about, how much you should get paid, and even the race gender pay gap is something that, when I think about money, it does hurt that you get paid less just for those two things. But then how do I move forward from a healthy mind and emotional place to be able to create wealth? So that's just my thoughts and experience.
Great. Thank you very much. Esther, did you have a comment?
Oh yeah, just just from the loan officer hat, like I I think it can be helpful to hear like I didn't even this job that I'm in now as a loan officer was open a whole year before I even thought of myself as capable of applying because I had like psychological barriers on what I was capable of around money. And you heard like I have literal like masters and stuff and do data, and I still didn't think I was qualified to do finances specifically. And so I think, for me, like a lot of the battle, like the battle has just been like my own like self-image and unpacking some of that. I don't know if others feel that way or might relate a little, maybe not. But I think it's really important to have could like, just like reframe how you see yourself. And I think co-ops are a really helpful tool to do that.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for those comments. I really appreciate it. Sharing your experiences. And I think, I don't think any of those things are going to surprise anybody in this group. Those all probably sound very familiar. And there's a reason for that, obviously. There are intentional structures that are built into our financing and capital access systems around who gets access to what and who doesn't. And there are also some unintentional things that come out of that everybody ends up buying into, even if they want it to be different and change. And there are times, of course, where those of us who are trying to create alternative models unintentionally end up replicating some of those things. And so there are layers upon layers here. And we're not going to unpack all of that today, but I want to sort of throw that out there front of mind as we think about this. How do we access capital for our cooperatives as we think about our cooperatives as operating in a new way in the economy and a new way for people to get done what they need to get done? And we try to do that with shared capital, and we sometimes are successful and sometimes we stumble and we learn along the way. And it's working with y'all and your priorities that helps us to grow as well. And ultimately, I think one baseline here thing that we will come back to again and again is about this is a relationship. It's a relationship between the people that have some resources and the people that want to use those resources or need those resources to accomplish something. And often in the regular economy, for the most of us, it's very transactional and it's checking boxes and qualifying for this, and this number means that. But the more you dig into that, you realize that for the heads of the banks, the heads of the capital institutions, it is about relationships, but it's about very exclusive relationships. So thinking about all of those things as we move forward, how do we change that and how do we think differently? This is a picture of Red Emma's, which is a bookstore, coffee shop in Baltimore. They have been very successful in not just running a bookstore and coffee shop, but being supportive of creating a true alternative, accessible economy in Baltimore and the surrounding area as well. I'll pass it over to Esther.
Thank you. Yeah, so one of the things I find really powerful about shared capital in particular as a lender is that we ourselves are a co-op of co-ops. So we're like so once you become a borrower, you have to become a member to be able to borrow. Okay, so our members are our borrowers, the co-ops that we lend to, and there are about 300 ever, and then currently we have about 100 borrowers or more. And so with that comes the governance and network part. So, once you become a member co-op, you can have someone from your co-op run for our board, vote on decisions, engage with our loan fund together to figure out how do we live this as aligned to our values as we can, you know, and there are ways to get involved as well as on the committees. Like we have the loan committee, which reviews each of our loans, just about all of our loans that go through. And we have a racial justice committee, executive committee, a few others. So there are different ways to get involved if you become a member. There's also the element of investment. So we have about 25 million in assets, more or less, and about almost a third of that comes from members. So the co-ops so once you become a borrower, the members, so you're part of that investment. And that's really powerful because if you collectively own the cooperative, then you have more of a say and more power over the direction it goes. Okay, so like that, to me, that speaks volumes as well. So it's that work it and own it, part, or like I guess sorry, I come from worker co-op background, so I was thinking work it, own it, but it's like the co-op owned and operated and governed. So yeah, so I just wanted to share that part as well. Thanks. You're on mute.
Thank you, Esther. This might be more detail than you necessarily need, but I find it interesting to share and be very transparent about where does shared capital's money come from and where does it go? And where it comes from, as Esther was just saying, makes a big difference. The fact that about a third of our dollars come from cooperatives and individuals that are part of cooperatives that want to create the system, that means that we can make decisions with our money that other lenders can't. We can be flexible and patient in ways that other lenders can't. But we do, as you can see, we rely on foundations, we rely on mission-based impact funds, religious organizations, a bunch of different groups. You may notice that regulated banks are missing from this pie chart. That's mostly intentional. I mean, we would be okay using their money, but often their money comes with too many strings attached. And we don't want to be beholden to their priorities when we need to set our own priorities. And then where does our money go? Well, you can see a little more than a third of it goes to worker cooperatives. That could be any kind of business, but they're worker owned. About a third of it goes to housing cooperatives owned by the residents. About 20% goes to consumer owned grocery stores. And the rest goes to a mix of producers, federations, multi stakeholder co ops, and different sorts of cooperative models. Back to you, Esther.
Yeah, so some guiding principles of our cooperative capital that you may recognize from the 7 co-op principles are democratic member control, member economic participation, autonomy and independence, and cooperation among cooperatives. So with the democratic member control, again, that relates to our board and voting on big issues that come up every once in a while. You can join a committee, have a say. If you're emailing us and you're like, hey, I'm a member and this is what matters to me, we can integrate, we can start integrating that feedback, right? Member economic participation. So like we were talking about, it's really important to us that co-ops own a meaningful amount of our loan fund so it can influence the direction. Autonomy and independence. While we have some required or like understanding assessments as a lender, we also don't want to dictate how you run your business. So we want to listen to how we can support you with this money. And, you know, the way I look at it is, what do you want to do? And can you pay the loan back? More or less, like in some ways, Mark's like, "Ugh," but it's a little simplified, but no, I'm just kidding. Um, but um, but yeah, like we want to make sure that we can support your work and work with you to see how that can play out in the shape of a loan or line of credit, and at times equity. And then cooperation amongst cooperatives. Um, we as Shared Capital Co-op work with a ton of co-ops throughout the US, like or co-op related organizations like Nexus. And um, like I know like we're constantly connecting co-ops to each other to like if one's dealing with an issue and we hear another can help, we try to, help them connect. So we really try to live that out. We really do live that out. So yeah, thank you. Back to you, Mark.
Yeah, and just one other comment on here. I think that, the framing there was around like how does shared capital approach this, but I think these principles of cooperation are particularly important for you when you approach any lender or any investor, and that you should be making these demands, or you should be making sure that you as a cooperative continue to have control over that relationship and those dollars, that you are autonomous and independent in relationship to that lender and investor as well, that the cooperative really does control things along the way, and that you are using a tool, a resource someone else has, but that doesn't mean they get to tell you what to do or necessarily how to do that. That can be a constant struggle depending on where you're finding your capital. But it's a baseline that I think all cooperatives should be striving for if possible. Proof Bakery here is a wonderful bakery in Los Angeles that converted to worker ownership about 3 years ago now, and normally has lines out the door and down the block because they make some yummy food. Back to you, Esther.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And so let's talk about like what kind of things do co-ops need money for? Um, so you can think of your own co-op and say, what would I like a loan for? Um, and here's a little list of different ways your co-op could use money, basically. So it could be for working capital. So maybe you're getting started or you're trying to grow and your activities have not quite led to the profitability stage yet, where you can pay for that labor. So in this case, a loan could be useful until your activities start like showing the profit, right? Um, it might be for inventory. So a lot of times co-ops, if they sell a product, they'll need to buy that inventory up front, or work out a deal with a vendor, right? And so a loan can help with that gap between when you buy the inventory and then after you sell it and actually make the money from that product. Another is equipment. So, for example, when I was at Equal Exchange, we had coffee roasters. And so that might be an example where we could have taken out a loan for a coffee roaster so that we can produce this, high quality fair trade small farmer coffee, Um, leasehold improvements. Um, there's a group, 5 Points, that we just made a loan to and in Chicago, and they renovated their space really nicely, and they're able to have more services around like acupuncture, massage, but they also have a beautiful event space now, and they've already made $10,000 from that in like the last few months. So, you know, um, upgrading your building. Real estate, so buying a cooperative home or building, right? So you need money for that oftentimes. And the other is a business acquisition or conversion. So we work with a ton of like worker co-op conversions. So businesses that were, not cooperative, and the selling owner or selling owners want to sell it to their employees. Oftentimes there's a lot of technical assistance involved from a co-op organizer, developer. And we can help the workers buy that business.
Great. Meerkat Media here is a small media production company out of New York City. They make some incredible documentaries and short films, and contract with a lot of progressive organizations for getting messaging out around the country. We gave them a loan to help build out that space that they're walking through right now.
Yeah, so matching your co-op needs to like how do you know so how do you know what kind of money to get or what kind of need you have? Okay. And that's also this is just to say like upfront, like this is where you can always like email Mark and I or shared capital in general, like our contact line and ask to just set up a call and we can talk through your specific case, okay? Um, but yeah, so oftentimes like working capital for staff, operations, and inventory would be good for a line of credit where um, you know, you may need a little you may need buffer money for like a certain period. Like it takes about 60 days before you make profit on your inventory, roughly. So you can pay that line back down after those 60 days, but you need some money in that period. So a line of credit could be good. Equity, if you can find someone to invest in your co-op, or a short-term loan tied to increased revenue. So this is particularly helpful if it's something that's like a one-time thing, not ongoing. Like a line of credit's more like for ongoing things like like inventory sales or something, or contracts. Say you have like net 90 on your contracts. That would be a great example where you might want a line of credit. Equipment or leasehold improvements are great for short-term loans, tied to, and we often tie those to the life of the like equipment or leasehold improvement. So like, we figure out, all right, like how long will this last? How long is it going to be helpful? We don't want you like paying like after it's no longer a useful piece of equipment, or whatever that looks like. So we try to be cognizant. We're really cognizant of like how do we match the loan to what you're doing. And real estate is good for a long-term mortgage or construction loan. So we do those oftentimes. And we also provide debt or equity, or you can also look for debt or equity for a business acquisition or conversion. So like I mentioned, we do a lot of those conversions to worker co-ops, and that's where a loan may come into play. And also, oh yeah,
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, and also there's the term of the loan, just some language around there. So the term is how long that loan is, how long you have it for and have to pay it back by. So if it's a 5-year term loan, you have to pay it back in 5 years. But then if it's sometimes folks want to amortize it. I feel like I'm saying that wrong, sorry. And you can have, say, like a 20-year amortization, and that gives it's like on the timing of when you pay what. So that'll give you smaller payments in that 5-year term, right? Like because it's like it's broken up into little bits, smaller bits. But at the end of that 5-year term, you're going to owe a balloon payment, which means you have to pay the whole thing all at once at the end, the rest, whatever you still owe. So, it depends on your situation. We always try to make this, like we always work with people to make sure that it's like reasonable and doable. And often we'll use that term as a check-in point and sometimes extend that term out farther so that you're not stuck with a major balloon payment if you can't pay it at that period as anticipated or something. So it's really relational how we work with folks.
Great, thank you. So there's a few different ways of kind of thinking about the kinds of money that you need, how you're using it, and where that money comes from. There is this sort of two sort of generalized categories of capital that people generally turn to. And you hear these terms a lot: debt and equity. And at its most basic form, the difference is, generally speaking, that debt is something where the person who's providing that debt most likely has a lien on some collateral, some equipment, some assets of your cooperative, as a secondary source of repayment. So they have a little bit more reassurance that even if things don't go so well, there will be a way to pay that debt back. And debt is normally has a, as Esther was talking about, has this schedule of payments. So you're expected to pay a certain amount every month, and it moves forward through the life of the loan. And you always know exactly how much is being paid, how much of that is going towards principal, and how much of that is going towards interest on the loan. Equity is more flexible in the sense that you don't have a schedule of payments. Equity typically is a pool of money that you is invested in your cooperative that you can use for whatever you need. Working capital, just operations, buying stuff, whatever you might need for the company. It's cash you have to work with. And you only pay that equity back when you are profitable. And so the equity investor is taking a little bit different kind of risk in investing in you, because they don't necessarily know how much they're going to get back right away. And they don't have any extra way to pay that back if things go poorly. So from their perspective, they're taking a little more risk. But the benefit to those folks who are giving you that more flexible money with more flexible payments is that you will be paying them on that equity for as long as that equity is invested in your company. Meaning, you could ultimately, over the long haul, if you are very successful, be paying even more for that equity than you would for the debt. And we can dig into some of the nuances of that. But I want to sort of at the high level share sort of these differences between the nature of debt and the nature of equity. Most of what we do at Shared Capital is debt, but we have a pilot program for some equity investments that we've been working with and trying to raise more money that can be used as equity. Because as a co-op, equity is actually one of the best things you can have. It's because you can do what you need with it. But then, of course, like I said, you're giving up more later. And debt usually takes the form of a loan, like we're talking about. You might have what's called a senior loan or a subordinate loan, meaning some lenders need to be in first place with a claim on your cash and a claim on payments and a claim on collateral, whereas a subordinate lender is willing to sit behind that other lender and take additional risk in their perspective, and be more patient and may not get paid back as quickly as the senior lender. Preferred stock and common stock are common forms of equity investments in a cooperative. Common stock is actually just a fancy name for your member share. When you form your cooperative, the members are each buying a little bit into that cooperative. That's your common stock. That's the best kind of equity because that's your money. You do what you want with it. Whereas preferred stock is something that's a little bit unique to the world of cooperatives. It functions differently than other kinds of investments out in the rest of the economy, where it is an equity investment into your cooperative, and it does get a priority of payment over lenders and some other investors. But it doesn't give the investor any control or voting rights over your business. And that's unique. And that's an important, unique factor in that in the rest of the United States economy, outside of the co op economy, an equity investor normally is claiming a seat on your board or some management control or the ability to direct your decisions as a business owner. And within a cooperative, if we think back to those autonomy and independence principles, we don't want to operate that way. We don't want to give you more power just because you have more money. And so it can be harder to find equity investments in a cooperative because you're having to find people that are willing to take that risk with you, but also aren't able to have any control. And in the co-op world, we usually call that a preferred stock investment. I threw grants and donations on here because they can be fundamentally very important, especially to a startup cooperative. But grants can be hard to get for a for-profit cooperative. Sometimes you need a fiscal sponsor to give you access to dollars, but you can always take donations from individuals, fundraisers, crowdfunding, all these different kinds of grassroots forms of raising capital. I put on the far left there because it functions as a form of equity, although grants and donations and crowdfunding investments typically aren't requiring any repayment down the road. I want to pause for just a moment because there's a bunch to unpack there, and there's even more stuff on the next slide, but want to make sure I'm not moving along too fast. Any comments or questions around that? Okay, these spots are on the next slide. We're just adding more information to this about specifically where do we go to find this kind of money, and whether it's loans or it's equity investments or it's grants, where does that come from for cooperatives specifically? Of course, you can turn to your members. Your members may or may not have any of their own cash in their pockets, but that's the first round of where does our money come from often. And it could take any of those forms. Members can make loans to their cooperatives. They can make equity investments. They can donate money, of course, to their co-ops along the way. CDFI and mission-based loan funds are probably the most common form of debt and occasional preferred stock. A CDFI, you may or may not have come across yet, it's an acronym for Community Development Financial Institution. Essentially, it is a designation by the federal government for a mission-based loan fund, a mission-based community lender of some sort. Shared Capital is a CDFI. There are thousands of CDFIs around the country, but they often have particular niches or markets that they serve. Some of them may only work with affordable housing. Some of them may only work with healthcare facilities. Some of them might only work with traditional small businesses. So if you're looking around for support from a CDFI, it's important to get to know kind of the nature of that CDFI and whether they even do what you need them to do for you. Other cooperatives are also fairly commonplace to turn. And really ultimately kind of that's the shared capital model, is we were started by cooperatives 45 years ago who couldn't get a loan, and they said, hey, we need money for co-ops, and this is essentially co-ops investing in co-ops. But co-ops will invest in each other directly or indirectly in different ways and can play all of those roles. Crowdfunding, I mentioned already. There's a variety of different forms that crowdfunding might take, everything from just throwing a party to getting Kiva investors to different kinds of Kickstarter funds and things like that. And obviously, usually those dollars are fairly flexible for you to use as well, and you kind of call them an equity-like investment. Banks and credit unions are on this list, but they are not terribly active in the co-op space. And we'll unpack that a little bit more in a future slide. But ultimately, most banks and credit unions are regulated by state regulators and or federal regulators. And it can be an excuse for them to not work with a co-op. But there is to a certain degree, it is a legitimate excuse. And if we want things to change with typical banks and credit unions, it means we may have to go to the federal government and make changes at the regulatory level to even allow some banks and credit unions to work with cooperatives. Otherwise, they will use a traditional lending approach in their relationship with you as a co-op, and that will remove your power, remove some of your autonomy, and change the nature of your business. There are co-ops that do this because they don't have any other option, and it's the only thing they can do, and they do their best to make it work. It's not ideal. So it's really kind of a question that you already have to make for yourselves of whether you want to step into that space or not. Impact investors, I mentioned how we have a lot of money in our fund from impact investors. That's kind of just a broad category of social impact investor folks. It's folks that have probably inherited money or have made money in various ways and are looking to sort of do good with that money. And as you might imagine, there's a whole spectrum of types of impact investors and social investors, some of which align very well with cooperatives and what we're trying to accomplish, some of which don't get it. And we can walk away from some of those because they may not understand what real change looks like. Foundations, mentioned that with grants. Foundations are typically providing grants, but they can sometimes support either directly or indirectly a loan or an investment. It's when a foundation makes a sort of loan-like investment, it's usually called a program-related investment, a PRI, and not all foundations do that. So many foundations may not be interested. They may want to help you, but they can't because of their structure and their products. But more and more, very slowly, foundations are understanding creative ways for them to do that. And that's sometimes another space where an intermediary might play a role. A fiscal sponsor sort of takes the money on your behalf and passes it through to you, or a group like Shared Capital or another CDFI who takes their money as an investment and turns it into an investment into your cooperative. And then finally on here is public subsidy. There's a lot of different ways that public subsidy can support your cooperative. I fully appreciate that a lot of folks trying to create alternative models shy away from that because, well, we don't want government money. We don't want what comes with that. We don't want where that money comes from and how it's treated typically. But my position has often been, as long as we continue to subsidize the models of Walmart and Amazon, well, we better be using public subsidies to subsidize cooperatives at the same time. As long as it's available, let's use it and put it to better use. Again, there's a lot on this slide. So would love to hear if there's any kind of clarifying questions before we move on. Okay, so we will, let's see, I think the next slide is still mine. So now we're stepping into kind of, how does this work? And I apologize, I know we are running short on time. I'm hoping we can have a little extra time at the end if possible. But for the context for here, again, lenders and investors, I sort of mentioned this already, they come in all different shapes and sizes. They come with a lot of different priorities. They come with a lot of different ways that they ultimately, what it's coming down to is how they assess their risk. So, you know, they're making an investment. They want you to do something with that money. But their measuring sticks are mostly around figuring out what is the likelihood of your ability to pay them back eventually. And that decision is driven by a lot of different things. Their own mission, regulation, as I mentioned, where their money's coming from, local politics, other organizations, competition. A lot of those different things will sort of blend together to determine whether they're going to say yes or no to you, or even if they say yes, what the structure of that investment looks like. And so part of this is about kind of matchmaking is you don't want to waste your time trying to push change at an institution that is just not going to change for you. While you could be spending your time finding other institutions or helping to create other institutions that can be a resource for you. And of course, there's strategic and political decisions to be made within that dialogue in that context. For us, I'm going to talk about, you know, this is kind of how Shared Capital approaches it, but it's also, we think, a baseline for how any cooperative lender or investor should be looking at things. There's something that you may have heard of at some point called the C's of credit, and it's sort of shorthand for that list of things that a lender or investor evaluates to evaluate the likelihood of repayment. And we're going to talk about each of those a little bit, kind of move quickly through those slides, but there are also some elements that most business lenders don't pay much attention to that are very unique to cooperatives and should also be understood and considered as any sort of good co-op lender is doing their analysis as well. Agua Gorda here is a cooperative here in Minnesota, Latino farmers cooperative, and gave them a loan many years ago for some distribution systems and some working capital. I'm going to start out with the first of those C's. And actually, I'll talk through a few of them as quickly as I can, and then hand things over to Esther to talk about other elements of the relationship. Cash flow, ultimately, it's, you know, can you make enough money to pay back the loan? Kind of a fairly simple question. But figuring that out can take a while, and it can take some spreadsheets and some number crunching. and to figure out if there's enough cash to do that. You will often hear the term debt service coverage from a lender when they're doing that analysis. What that really means is how much money do you have left over after you pay all your operating expenses to pay towards the loan? And normally, a lender wants you to have more than you need to pay back because that creates a cushion. Things don't always go as planned. And so we want to know that essentially for every dollar that you would need at the end of the month to make your loan payment, we want to know that you've got about $1.20 or $1.30. So like 20% or 30% more than what you really need. So that if you have a bad month, you still have enough to pay the loan and keep on moving. And different lenders will have different measuring sticks for that, of whether they want to see that 20 or 30 or 40 or 50% coverage sometimes on different transactions. Collateral and security. This is really only secondary repayment, meaning that the cash flow is where normally you're going to be repaying from. But if things go poorly, in a worst case scenario, if the business fails and shuts down, where else can a lender turn to try to reclaim that cash and get that loan paid back? And that's usually what you call hard assets. It's equipment, it's inventory, it's real estate, it's vehicles, it's stuff like that can be turned around and sold, and then that cash can be used to pay that back. The measuring stick here for most lenders is something called either loan to value or coverage ratio. And again, similar to cash flow, when we sort of estimate what the value of any piece of equipment is, we're going to discount that. So if you bought a fancy piece of brand new equipment this year and it costs you $100,000, we're not going to say it has a value of 100, because as soon as you unpack it and start using it in your business, it's lost some value. And so there's a discount that gets applied to each piece of equipment. Depending on the kind of equipment or collateral it is, it could be between 25 to 75% of the initial purchase price. Put a question here at the bottom about personal guarantees. Actually, we could spend a whole session talking about this challenge and these issues. This is one of the biggest stumbling blocks for traditional regulated lenders investing in particular in worker cooperatives, because in the rest of the business lending world, it is standard practice to not just have the business be on the hook for repaying the loan, but for at least one or two individual people be on the hook for that entire debt for that business. That model, of course, comes out of typical entrepreneurs who have one person who's owning their business. That entrepreneur gets all of the benefits of that business. They also get all the pain and liabilities of that business. And so the logic that gets applied is that because you get all the upside, if things go bad, you have to pay for all the bills at the end of the day too. Whether or not you agree with that logic, that's the normal way of doing business in the lending world in the United States. But again, going back to our principles of autonomy and independence and member control, a proper cooperative lender is not going to ask for personal guarantees, because we are not underwriting you as individual people. We don't care about your personal credit score. We don't care that you've had challenges with financials in the past, because we understand that most individuals in the United States have challenges with financials unless they've inherited a lot of money or unless they are a white man like me. And so we need to take that out of the picture and say we are underwriting the cooperative itself. And we stop short of ever, we call it, piercing that corporate veil and attaching anything to the individuals. And so that's one of the more fundamental elements that people struggle with in the investment world and lending world. And it's something that the world of cooperative lenders has fully embraced. But there's a lot of work to do before the rest of the investing world comes along. Going to move a little quicker here through some of these, but capacity is another analysis. It's really kind of, can you get this done? Do you have the right people doing the right jobs? Do you have enough reserves? Do you know how to kind of keep track of your money and your bookkeeping systems? And when we're doing this analysis, we're not doing this analysis at the the end of the day. We're not doing this to find a way to say no. We're doing this to really assess where are the challenges and potential weaknesses in your model, and then work with you to figure out how to shore those up. It might be, hey, it looks like you need to hire a different position or tweak some of this because then you can cover the needs you have for your business. It might be, we really want you to work with a technical assistance provider or a consultant, or at least have access to them so that they can help you through any challenges or weaknesses we see. It might be feedback on your budget to say, you know what, I think you can still run this business, but we'd love to see you kind of push things this way or that way in your numbers. Again, this is kind of advice and support we can offer along the way. But ultimately, it's important for you all to be as transparent as you can about your own challenges, because then we can really look at this as a partnership and try to fill those gaps together. Character is sort of translates differently in the world of co-op lending. Again, in the small business world, they're looking at the character of one individual person. And do they say what they're going to do? Do they do what they say they're going to do? Do they have a good reputation? Do they have a good track record? For the co-op, we're looking at the group dynamics. So how well does this group of people make a decision? How well do they deal with conflict and challenges internally? What is the dynamic among the group, and sort of communication styles and those sorts of things? Sometimes it is helpful to get a reference from another organization or some individuals if we just don't know each other at all. But really, we're trying to unpack this sort of character of the cooperative itself. And then finally, conditions is just kind of a word for the market around in which you are operating. So, why are you creating these widgets versus some other kind of product? Do you kind of know where you're going to be selling these things? Do you know who your customers are going to be? Do you know what your competition looks like? There are industries, we work with almost every kind of sector that's out there. And some sectors struggle. It's really, really hard to open up a grocery store these days, where it wasn't as hard 30 years ago. And so we sort of think differently about how we approach it and what we ask of the borrowers to make sure that they can be successful in their business model. That it's really kind of helping. We don't ask for a formal business plan. We don't always expect you to go out, conduct a full market study, pay somebody a bunch of money to do that. But we want to know that you understand your own business enough so that you can unpack those things for yourself. One red flag I do want to raise that is sometimes a challenge as people come to us that are just starting out is this assumption that just because we are a co-op, people will buy our product. Just because we're a co-op, everyone will come our way. We'll get the business we want because we are good people. We're doing good work. And some people will. There are a lot of people, and there are hopefully a growing number of people who choose to spend their money in equitable ways and in economic change. But you can't rely on that to be successful as a business. And so it's important to understand, outside of your identity as a co-op, what other things about the quality of your services, the quality of your product, the way you do your work is really going to bring business your way, as opposed to people choosing someone else down the street. Esther.
Yeah, so we also really we started from co-ops in I think the 70s, and we continue to be for co-ops. So we look at things from a co-op angle in our underwriting, which is, not the norm for other lenders. And also I just want to reiterate a couple things that we do that are unique to co-ops that I think really matter, just to make sure you heard them, is we don't look at personal credit scores. We don't take out personal collateral. We don't use personal collateral. So no one's like home is on the line or car, like their personal home or car. It's like we just look at the co-op business. And we also we don't look at social security numbers or ITINs if you have any folks who are undocumented or anything like that. So, to me that like makes a difference for like why I want to work here, you know. And let's see here. So with cooperatives, we'll look at things around ownership, like how does someone become an owner? What are the rights and responsibilities? Are there multiple classes of membership or just one? Next slide. Next slide. Oh yeah. And then also governance. So we look at the control, like who governs, who owns and or who controls the business. We look at like how's the board elected. We'll look at the bylaws. We ask for bylaws. We ask for your articles of incorporation. Are non-members or investors allowed to serve on the board? What's the relationship between members, management board, and all of our staff has a co-op background, so we're able to like assess this and talk it through and just like, like say, hey, here, like for example, we had a group right now that has like 3 people out of like 20 that are worker owners, and that's like not enough. So we're like, we absolutely need a plan for you to get up to at least 50% membership, like worker ownership. And so that can also like help encourage them to improve their cooperative nature, right? So we'll work with you, work on plans, checkpoints, we look at established policies and if they're clear or not on how do members join or exit. If it's not clear, that can make it frustrating for people, like new people to join your co-op, if it's not clear how you become a member. And we also look at transparency and decision making. So are folks getting all the folks getting information in your co-op? What matters are being addressed by the membership versus the board. So, pretty like standard co-op things that I'm sure you've talked about, but like we look at those as well. We also look at equity and patronage. So, how's the value of the share determined? Is it within reach of folks who are part of the co-op, like based on the industry you're in and background of folks? And like, is it enough too? Like, is it $5, which, isn't a big investment versus like way too much money, like $10,000, or like at Equal Exchange, it was almost 4,000 and I did not have that up front. So like, so they let us take it out of our paycheck over like 4 years. So we'll like look at all of these things, like look at your co-op individually, and look at like how profit surplus are allocated, all of that. You know, we have a lot of like conversations and like it's we'll work with you too if we see an issue. So like please come to us, like we'll talk through it, we'll work with you. And so be prepared for change. Everything's moving around all the time. It's dynamic, like the world is dynamic, right? And so yeah, so like, I think like whenever I go on a vacation or a trip, I do my best to plan, make up backup plans, you know, and then with all that information on hand, I then feel I can be more spontaneous too when things don't go as planned. I can take the bus instead of the subway, right? Or whatever it is, right? So, and I know where those things are. So, we'll look and just make sure you're prepared. And we also help with thinking through your industry, your market, um, or connect you to folks who can. We know this is a huge thing to have a business. This is not easy to start a co-op or to have your own business collectively or not. Like it's helpful, I think, to have more heads thinking together around your particular business, but it's a big thing. So we want to be there to support your work and help connect the dots and facilitate other connections. So thank you. Yeah. Are there any like questions or things that you've thought about, insights? We'd love to hear them. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you both so much. Just making space for questions and maybe going back to the chat to see if I missed anything. Oh, a question from Edrins earlier was, Edrins, how do you find social impact investors?
Yeah, I mean, there are sort of national conferences that happen throughout the year where all those people with all that money show up. And depending on the kind of space it is, sometimes just anybody can walk in and participate. Sometimes they're somewhat exclusive in those spaces. Um, and so often you might be working with a group, with your lender, or with somebody like Shared Capital, or with somebody who's sort of an intermediary to help kind of find some of those along with you. Um, but there's no like master database, unfortunately. Some website you can go to do all of that. I think Esther did share a couple of resources of folks that are in that space, and in particular in that space around change in the economy and creating a new economy. And that can be like the New Economy Coalition. There can be referrals that can be made through that group as well, and folks there that can sometimes make those connections too.
And oh, sorry, another question. Is there a formula for member equity /shares?
Hmm.
I can take a stab if you like.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think so. There's no like one formula. I think the power of co-ops is that you decide together through talking it through and looking at different factors. Um, However, like with your particular group, but some considerations are, is it going to be an affordable amount? Whether, and especially like given like if you can pay it over time or if it's expected in one lump sum up front. That's another consideration. Um, what's your industry? So Isthmus Engineering Co-op, Worker Co-op, I think their share is like $10,000. That's the most I've heard. And others are like 50. It just depends on what is important for your group and also for your industry and also where your members are coming from. So what can folks reasonably afford based on their backgrounds, and are you being inclusive of everyone in your group? So yeah, those are some considerations. And I think Nexus can help, and we're glad to talk through it too. But yeah.
Yeah, just another thought on that. Like what I usually tell people is it should be a meaningful amount. And so, like Esther was saying, that can vary from group to group. You want it to be enough so that it's like people are thinking about handing that cash over, or cutting that, writing that check, or whatever to their co-op. That it's something they feel like they're really making an investment based on whatever assets or cash they might have. Um, but obviously, you don't want to set it so high that you're pricing people out, or so low that it's insignificant. $5 doesn't really mean anything to most folks. And so might be driven by your mission and structure and who you're trying to incorporate into the cooperative too. But it doesn't scare us away if members bring very little to the co-op. It just means we have to work harder together to make up that difference if folks don't have a lot of resources where they're coming from.
Thank you so much. Maybe a final question to close out. Anyone feels called to? If there are none, how can folks reach you to talk more?
Oh, oops, I just took that slide off. But yeah, you can reach us at Shared Capital. I'm Mark at sharedcapital.coop. Esther is Esther at sharedcapital.coop. Feel free to give us a call or send us an email at any point.
Yeah, please do. And also, I really appreciate the work of Nexus and all that you all are doing. This is a lot of work and hard, and just it's so exciting to see. So thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you both for coming and making space for us this morning. Definitely a lot to think through. But yeah, I think it was all really amazing information. So thank you both and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, take care. Bye.
All right. How is everyone? I know there's a lot of information for me. Like, how is everyone feeling right now? We could take, we're gonna take our break soon, but just want to maybe make some space for some small group discussions before going to break as a way to like process. So, all right. Did you have a question, Liana? Because I actually did not have a question.
It was more just about their slides, but we can connect with them after about that. So,
Oh, sorry, a question for reflection.
oh, it was more just what's coming up for you, like initial thoughts, feelings, especially with going from, our grounding that we did into that. Just kind of what's coming up, anything that you're, you know, still sitting with, wanting to explore more. So kind of just general like initial thoughts and reflections and what's coming up for you.
Well, for me, loans always sound kind of intimidating just because, loans are something that you have to be able to pay back. But I really like how they said that, they don't need personal guarantees per person, that is like for the company and stuff like that. So you don't have to put up your house or your car and things like that. So yeah, it's something to explore because we may need working capital because in working with the Department of Human Services, they said right off bat that you need to be able to sustain yourself for at least 90 days before you even see a payment. So even with that, that's gonna cause us to have to, have the money to invest in the services that we provide.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if I know there may be there's a couple groups I know that are being funded by shared capital and they all seem to have had a good experience anyway because they're hands-on. So I think even asking that question or if you're during your exploration, reaching out to them. I also think it's because they're a co-op made up of people that used to work in cooperatives, they can be a little more gentler than like traditional financing models or loan agents for cooperatives. And so yeah, that'd be a good space to explore. And also like the three C's, that's a model of theirs I've always like really enjoyed. So it doesn't put the onus on the individual, but rather the collective. And that's what the cooperation's about anyway. But yes, also understood that when talking about loans, it feels heavy because for all the reasons that we mentioned this morning and so much more. So thanks for sharing. I think another point I just want to make sure that was heard too is that the scale of like how or where to get funding and that there's so many resources. There are so many resources, but oftentimes the resources are not really open to folks for systemic issues. But that's another way to explore too. I know some co-ops that are for sure fiscally sponsored so they can get access to grants because that for-profit structure does not allow them to get grants by themselves in most cases. And so I think there's like a variety of places you can plug into social impact investing, crowdfunding. Yeah. But yeah, anything else coming up for people, as Liana was asking?
And if folks, I know we're getting close to our break, but I did want to make room if people did want to talk in a smaller group if that felt more comfortable, just to give us a few minutes, just to have that space. So I was thinking maybe groups of 2 or 3, we can just spend the last few minutes in those groups and then we'll go to our break. So probably have like 5 to 7 minutes just to talk. So I'll assign those now. And the rooms are open. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Hope your break was nourishing. And I'm sure folks will continue to join us. But I'm going to introduce our speaker for the afternoon, Christina Nicholson, our colleague at Nexus and the Shared Ownership Center at Nexus. All right. So Christina has been working in cooperatives in Minnesota for 25 years in a wide range of roles, from front of house retail to construction to cooperative consulting. In all of her endeavors, the thread has been working to connect communities to each other through common cause. This has been framed for Christina as a shared economy that questions the normative culture of the unequal exploitation of labor. Rather than focus on what is wrong, cooperatives look to inspire a shared sense of success and equity among community members within the cooperative. When done well, cooperatives should celebrate the unique contributions of individuals while challenging assumptions about how we perpetuate destructive myths around gender, race, and class. She is so excited to be a part of Nexus and look forward to learning from her peers who continue to inspire her with their vast knowledge of community wealth building, leadership, and development of strategic partnerships. When not at work, Christina likes to spend time with her wife, their dog, and their daughter when she is home, all while making food, growing food, sharing food, and arguing about who is doing the dinner dishes. Welcome, Christina. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks, Liana. Thanks, Nicole. It's great to see you all. I'm really glad to be able to share space with you. So low-key, I know that finance can be not the most compelling material. So I want to respect the space and the energy of it. And so what I'm going to do is, if you all are okay, I am just going to jump into the material and kind of walk you all through the PowerPoint. I'm happy to pause. I can go as quickly or as slowly as you all would like. I love all questions. And to me, the most important opportunity here is for folks to start seeing themselves in spaces that historically have been coded and not welcoming. And so I'm just going to jump in, and please stop me anytime you have questions. And Liana and Nicole, I'll look to you. If there's a question in the chat, just interrupt. I will pause and we'll explore that question. So really glad to be here. And with that, I will start sharing screen. Okay, can everybody see my screen okay? Okay, great. So what we're going to talk about today are some key tools for finance. What I've found in startups and employees who are buying businesses from their bosses is that there's a lot of unfamiliarity around kind of what we call the key analytical tools of finance. So if you all are preparing to go out and either write grants or look at loans or put together some kind of capital stack, which is different funding sources to come out to a specific number in order to acquire a property or buy the equipment for a business or buy raw materials to start a business if you're going to fabricate something. These are the specific tools that lenders and a lot of grant makers are going to be looking at. So I thought it would be helpful for you all to at least get familiar with them in a space that hopefully is a little more comfortable and welcoming. And so we're going to start with key tools. So the goals today are to get connected. And the way we do that is you all share stories or potential issues or questions you have around a scenario that you have, and we're happy to get into those. What I'm going to do is just do a quick overview of financial management. We're going to talk about profit and loss. We're going to talk about budget to actuals. We're going to talk about cash flow, and we're going to talk about pro formas. And any of you, I open up my email at the end. If any of you have specific questions, if you're working on a project, if you are curious about some other funding sources that are out there and you want to know whether or not they're accessible, I'm happy to be a resource for you all. So I'm part of the Shared Ownership Center. So that's me with shorter hair. That's Christina. And then my colleagues are Patty Biafra and Benjamin Tsai. Patty and I tend to focus on worker ownership together, be that a startup cooperative or if that's centered in employees buying a business from their boss. Benjamin focuses on community-owned real estate, so looking at that as an anti-gentrification approach to ensure that the equity that is growing in our community stays in our community. So the first thing I want to talk about when I said I'd kind of do a high-level financial discussion, profit and loss is really sort of your bottom line of how your financials work. People can say, you know, how much money did you make last year? I made $35,000. Okay, well, if you spent 50, right? It doesn't matter that you made 35 because you're already spending more than you got. So when people tell me how much they make, I'm not really that interested in it. What I'm interested in is how much they netted, right? That's how much you have after all your bills are paid. And in traditional kind of household economies, where you see that difference between income, cost and expense, and net income, this cost and expense, so let's say somebody makes $35,000 a year, their costs and their expenses for their apartment, maybe they have a car, maybe they have insurance, maybe they took a couple of trips last year because life is stressful. If that ended up being $45,000, typically you have a negative net income of $10,000, and what you see is what's in here is credit cards. All right, that's sort of that bridge between what you make and what you actually have at the end of the year. And so anytime somebody tells me they're making, if I may, some baller ass money, I'm always more interested in how much they're spending. It's one thing to make money like a baller, but low key, you don't want to be spending it that way. So really you want to be thinking about, after all your bills are paid, what do you have left? And that is the conversation that allows you to start thinking bigger about how you reinvest, how you set aside money. For example, if you want to buy a house or a condominium, you always want to make sure that this middle ring is less, right, than your bottom ring. So whatever you bring home, it's always the dance to try and manage this middle piece, right? So this is, I'll go back just for a second. So this is like really basic breakdown. You bring in money, you pay your bills, you got money left over, or you don't, right? Life is hard. And the struggle is real, and those groceries are not cheap. So hopefully you get to this place where you have some money left over. In a business sense, in a cooperative sense, right? It looks a little more complicated, but it's not. This is a household budget. So if you think about a business, basically it's the same level, right? You're looking at how you bring in money for your business. Or if you want to own a property and you're looking at doing a capital stack like that, and you have tenants, this income would be how much rent or how much revenue your tenants are paying you, right? So you can apply this profit and loss statement to a number of different kinds of businesses. It doesn't just have to be retail. It doesn't just have to be if you're a maker, for example, and so maybe you have maker space and you're doing stuff on the weekend as a side hustle, or you have real estate. Income is income. Right? So you may also get income from a couple of different streams. Again, if you have a full-time job or part-time job and you also have a side hustle, that's all this is. It is just maybe you babysit, maybe you're taking care of your sister's kids a couple of times a month, whatever your revenue streams are, sit down and make a list of them. And it can even be like, my daughter would sell a bunch of her clothes online, like Facebook Marketplace, whatever. Anywhere somebody's paying you, make a list of that. And that comes to your total income. Your cost of goods sold are if you have to pay money like raw material to make something. So for example, let's say you're a sewer, and let's say you buy material at the thrift store, and then you do cross stitch, or you do an enhancement to level up that product and make it more accessible, more interesting, more personal. And so there's a market for that. And so people want to buy that. Your cost of goods are that raw material, your thread, whatever that you buy at the thrift store, at the sewing place, whatever. So your gross profit is after you make your money, whatever you have to spend for that initial product that you're going to use to level up to make money. So gross profit is just your after your raw material cost. Then you get into all the costs. So if you have, let's say you're doing a pop-up bakery on the weekends, and so you've got maybe 2 staff people, you've got all the flour, all the stuff you had to buy to make products. This is everything it costs you to run your business. So if you're paying people, if you have a car that's a part of the business, any bank service charges, right? So like, let's say you're doing this pop-up and you have a Square, right? Square is going to have a fee. And so you have to calculate that fee as an expense you're going to pay. If you deliver stuff, you have to have insurance if you're going to run a business. So this is just everything that you list that costs you money that goes out the door. And that's your total expense. Net ordinary income is usually, oops, I'm sorry, guys. Net ordinary income is usually where most people stop. So this is just your net income. Sometimes you may make money one time for doing like a holiday event, or maybe you catered something, but you're after the catering event, you're like, nah, I'm not trying to do catering. I'm exhausted. But you did it one time, so you got paid for that one time, right? So it's not part of your regular business, but it is money you brought in. So at the end of the day, what you're always, oh my God, what you're always going to be focused on in this bottom line is your net income. So after all your bills are paid, what do you have in the bank? And one of the things we'll get into today is this is a profit and loss is always a snapshot, right? And so it's only going to tell the story about a specific period of time. You'll notice up here, it's for a year. Profit and loss statements can typically be monthly, they can be quarterly, or they can be annually. If you're going to go to a bank to get a loan, or you're looking for some grant gap financing, they're going to want to know what your business expenses are, and they're going to want to know some version of profit and loss. They're going to want to know if you're making money. So as you're starting to think about your endeavor, it's worth it to put it on paper. And it can just be like, usually when I write something first, I literally write it on a notebook like this. You don't have to be out here trying to get software and like some kind of CPA. You don't have to do any of that. You need a pencil and paper. So the whole point of this exercise, and you all will get this slide deck today, is to really just start writing down, even if it's in your imagination. Here's how much money I want to make. Bet, put down 50,000. That's how much you want to make. Cool, let's do it. Then start thinking about everything you're going to have to buy to make that money. And that's all this is. A profit and loss statement is no different than like your parents probably had like a checkbook, or they had like a little piece of like some kind of little notebook they wrote stuff down in for their bills. That's all this is. And it's a really great place to start thinking about how to make your business model real and understand the costs that are going to be associated with it. If you're buying a property, that property is going to need maintenance. Somebody's going to have to be out here in these streets blowing the snow when we get it again. So you want to be thinking about all those elements. And that's a profit and loss. When you go to a bank or you apply for a grant, what they're looking for not only is how you're going to make money, but they also want to understand that you know what you're going to have to be spending money on. So they want to know that you have a sense of how the business is going to run. So even if you haven't started your business yet, you're going to want to plan a profit and loss statement so you can anticipate what's coming. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit more about cost of goods sold and gross profit. So when you start getting into conversations with lenders, one of my hopes is that even if today is the first time that you're seeing some of these phrases, or if you're already in business and so you're familiar with these, but you're not sure kind of how the math works out, I wanted to walk you through this. So your basic formula is your sales or revenue. So sales and revenue are the same thing. It just depends on what business you're in. Your cost of goods sold are the raw material that you acquire in order to generate revenue. Then you have your gross profit. Overhead is that list of everything here. This is what's considered overhead, right? And you get into these conversations with, how shall I say, middle managers. And they're trying to sort of run their game and talk about overhead and COGS and all this. All it is noise. all they're talking about is the bills you're paying. So the other thing that I hope is that people start coming to the table being comfortable with the language because it is coded, and to be able to crack that code and be like, what, you want to know how much my bills cost? Cool, let's have that conversation, right? If it's their business or if you want to share it with them. So overhead is nothing but your expenses, that whatever it costs to run your business. Your net profit is what goes in the bank. So this is useful for companies with inventory. The reason I mention that, Liana mentioned in my introduction, I worked retail for a number of years. When you have inventory, you've purchased something that's your wholesale cost, and your goal is to sell it at an increase, at a markup for your retail cost. Everything that you've spent money on has money sunk into it. It already has an existing value. So that's the cost of goods sold. What you're trying to make money on is the distance between that raw material acquisition plus labor plus enough money to keep the business going, i.e. overhead, and generate a small enough profit. Whether or not you're charging enough for a product, people will tell you. They'll either tell you that's too high or they won't buy it. And that'll give you an indication that it may be too expensive. But these are just some concepts for you to be thinking about as you're thinking about your business, as you're thinking about what you want to charge for rent. The market will give you some context for what it is that you want to be thinking about in terms of your top line sales. So I wanted to dig into this just a different way. So all this is profit and loss statements, and I'm just trying to provide you a couple of different lenses to think about it. So your cost of goods, again, can be your raw material. It can be business overhead related to production. It can be packaging for a product. Like if you get, like, let's say we'll go back to a sewing business, you do some cute little sewing project, you're going to have a bag, maybe tissue paper that you're going to wrap up for folks when they buy that. All that is cost for you. So you're always balancing like how to have a unique product, unique packaging, trying to be cute with how much it costs you. So that's always something to keep in mind. For expenses, that's transportation, advertising, marketing, office supplies. There can also be others depending on the business. So these are all different areas that can cost you money that you want to be thinking about when you and your co-op are putting together your list of expenses and things that are going to cost you money. So for labor, payroll taxes, and benefits, all of those go into expenses. I'll just keep it easy. Cost of goods is raw material. Everything else, labor, everything else you spend is in expenses or overhead, as we saw on the previous slide. So that's everything it takes for you to make money. All right. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about budgets. And I've worked with a lot of folks who kind of feel that budgets and profit and loss are the same thing. They're related, but they're not. A budget is a plan. A profit and loss is an actual recording of what it is that you've done. So budgets are your plan for your future. It can be based off your profit and loss if you understand what it is. You have an existing business. You understand what these expenses have been in the past. So you have a list of everything you're going to have to pay out. This budget is a way for you to start planning forward and think about what you want to do differently. Are there expenses that are too high? Do you need to be making more money? And if so, how? Did you have an employee or 2 employees, but now you need 3 because you're really busy and you want to think about how to free up some more of your time to do marketing, some other things. So a budget can help you see where you are now and then where you want to go, right? So they frequently have the same categories as the profit and loss, but you're looking into a future. So profit and loss is basically a snapshot of where you are. A budget is looking into the future to see where you want to go. And that's the difference between the two. So I wanted to give you all a comparison for a budget. One thing that people talk about a lot is budget to actual. What that means is what you planned on doing versus what you actually did. So let's say on Friday, you're making plans for the weekend. Your plan is you're going to get some coffee, you're going to go see your cousin, you're going to hang out, and then you're going to go out to dinner. Instead, you wake up, you have a cold, you don't go see your cousin, and you don't go to dinner. So you save that money, right? So you budgeted, let's say 75 for the weekend, but you ended up only spending $10 on NyQuil. So your net savings was 65. That is budget to actual. It is not that complicated. In a business sense, this is an example of a budget. So what they planned on selling, their total sales projection, so a budget is a projection, was $1.2 million, right? 1,199. So let's say 1.2 million. What they actually sold was 1.16 million. So they were $32,000 off, right? And what they thought they were going to sell versus what they sold. As a key indicator, one of the things you're looking for is anything that has a parentheses is a negative number. Anything without parentheses is a positive number. So anything like this, consider that a minus. So they were below sales targets by 32,000. Their cost of goods sold, they did direct labor, direct material, and what they came up with is they thought it would cost 276,000 to make the materials. It actually cost them 279. So in addition to not making as much money as they hoped, they paid more for their expenses, right? And this is, again, sales, admin costs, salaries, advertising, etc. They projected they would spend 396. What's clear here is they tried to somehow pull back a little bit in their their planning. They were hoping they were going to make 396,000 in operating income, right? They only made 345. So they actually overall lost 51,000 or were 51,000 below where their projected sales were. Now, if you know this to be true, and this is for a year, what a lot of businesses do, and I find this particularly helpful in co-ops, is that you're not just looking at these numbers once a year. Like I need to look at my bank account every week. So, or at a minimum every month after my bills are paid. So you don't have to wait until the end of the year to find out you're broke, right? This is something that you can look at every month. And so you can break down these targets monthly to say, this is where we should be this month. You can break them down quarterly to say, we're below for the quarter. Why is that? And what could we change, right? Maybe a couple of people want to take summer vacations and you're like, okay, instead of hiring for those summer breaks, we're going to figure out how to soak up that labor so that we can decrease that labor without letting anybody go. And decreasing that labor will allow for us to grow our sales slightly. And so maybe we can reduce some of these numbers. So a budget can tell you what you're hoping to do. The actuals tell you what you really did. And the variance is where you're looking to see how close you were. You also look at this at the end of the year to understand where you want to make changes for the future year. At this point, this budgeted actual variance, this was the plan. The difference between this and a P&L is that a profit and loss goes into much more detail about the specific areas, like your light bill, your gas bill, all that. It gives you much more insight into those materials. So a budget is a plan. A profit and loss gives you much more detail about everything that you spent money on and everywhere you made money. So it's much more detailed, but they have a relationship, if that makes sense. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about, and this is where I find people get the most confused, is cash flow. So I'm going to walk through the slide. The balance of cash flow is the balance of cash received, called receivables, right? Less or minus the amount of cash that is paid out over a period of time. It's how cash moves in and out of the business. So a cash flow projection is another kind of a financial statement, and it tries to help you think about when cash is going to come into the business and when cash is going to flow out of a business over a future period of time. And it's used to see if projected receipts will be enough to cover projected expenses. the thing that I can't say enough is that a business can be profitable and still run out of money, right? So how can that be? Let's talk about it. Can any of you, so I'm going to ask this question, can any of you think of a time or a way that you could be profitable but still run out of money? Let me give you an example. Let's say you're a doctor. Let's say you're a therapist, because God knows I need one. I have one. She's really great, actually. So let's say I'm visiting my therapist, right? And let's say my therapist, Jessica, is charging $150 an hour per session. And let's say Jessica has an office that she's got to pay rent on. And let's say Jessica has rent that she's got to pay and a dog she has to take care of and all the other things that make life lifing, right? Cool, 150 an hour seems like a pretty good amount of money. If she has 10 clients, that's $1,500 a week. All right, so that's, but let's say that all but one of her clients are paying through insurance, right? And let's say that that insurance takes up to 6 weeks to pay her for every client that she comes to see. So let's say that she's not getting paid for 6 weeks, but that rent is due in 4. So even though she has this money coming into her and it's a good amount of money, her rent is due before that money comes to her because of the length of time it's taking for the insurance company to pay her. So even though on the books, she might have, let's say, $12,000 in her account, right? If her rent is $800 in her account, if she only has $600 because she's waiting on that receivable to come in, she's broke. Her rent is due before she gets her money. And that's what we mean when we're talking about how you can be profitable on paper, but run out of cash. And that is a really common thing for businesses. So I wanted to give you this example. It's a little detailed. You all can spend some more time with it when you get the slides to see if it makes sense. But I'm going to kind of walk you through this. And that therapist example is basically what we're talking about. Cash at the beginning of the month. Let's say that you all, let's say you start your co-op and let's say you get a grant for $5,000. Cool, right? So you're starting with $5,000. You have money coming in. You've sold some stuff. You have $7,500. You're getting collections of credit sales. So other money that you made previously that's coming in. You're not paying out any loans. So your total cash that you're expecting to come in is $9,500. In the meantime, you're paying that cost of goods, your inventory, right? You're paying your rent, you're paying wages, utilities, phone, insurance, marketing, accounting, it all just keeps coming. So what you see here is the cash coming in is $9,500, but the cash going out is $11,000, right? So yeah, making good money, but at the end of the month, losing money. So even though there were sales happening, transactions are happening, this person's losing money. So February, you start out with less money than you had in January. Not the end of the world, you're good. Still making that $9,500, you're making money. All those bills are still stacking up. And so now, even though you're not broke, you see that cash is going down over time. So fast forward, what you see is the amount of money being made every month is the same, but the expenses, right, are variable. And some months they're higher than others, which is very common. So what you see over time is if you look at cash at the beginning of the month, it's steadily going down. Cash at the end of the month, steadily going down. So what you see is even though they made some money, their revenue started to decrease here at the end. Their expenses were still really high. And so even though they had sales, they still lost money. So while you may see that you're making money, if that money isn't enough to cover all your expenses and leave you some at the end of the month, ultimately you're going to fail because you're going to run out of cash. And cash is the thing that you need to keep track of, because cash is the thing that's going to allow you to keep going. Your bills, as most of us realize by this point in our lives, steady keep coming irrespective of your income, right? So you need to be thinking about what bills are coming, when they're coming. And you also need to balance that with when you're getting paid. When I was in elementary school, we had this candy shop in the neighborhood called Mr. Z's. And everybody used to get their little allowance money and they'd go to Mr. Z's and get some now and laters. And there was always this kid that was like, can I just hold that $5 for you? And like a dummy, sometimes I'd be like, yeah, I feel bad. I want you to have some now and laters too. You can hold that $5. So if they hold that $5 for you for a month, right? And you're trying to go to Mr. Z's in a week, you don't got no money. So it is really that basic. You need to make sure the money coming in is hitting deadlines ahead of when your debt is due. And that's the dance. So I want to talk a little bit about pro formas as well. Now that we've talked about cash flow, right? We've talked about budgets, we've talked about profit and loss. All of these combine to sort of help you get a picture of how your business is operating now. But for a pro forma, typically when this is a lot more when you're starting co-ops, you're going to go into a lender and they're going to say, well, I want to see a pro forma. Well, first of all, I want you to know what that is. So it is basically a way to calculate financial results using very specific projections or presumptions. I'm going to read you through this and then I'll translate it. Pro forma financials may not be GAAP, which is a generally accepted accounting principles compliant, but it can be issued to the public to highlight certain items for potential investors. They can also be used internally by management for helping in business decisions. I also wanted to say this. None of us are going to be publicly traded companies, right? Any stockholders we have are going to be members of the cooperative. But you don't want your pro forma to be crazy. So you generally, and when you work with lenders, they're going to use the most conservative possible estimates of revenue and expenses. The reason I say that is because I think when most of us start a business or thinking about starting a business, we tend to be somewhat optimistic, right? We found a place in the market where we found a unique product that we really believe there's a demand for. So we want to think about our revenue, right? Realistically, we think that this is an opportunity. Here's how we're going to run those numbers. Then you get to a lender or you're talking with someone about getting a grant and they totally bust your numbers out. They're like, why do you think you're going to make this the first year? How are you going to do it? What's your marketing plan? What are you going to do to drive sales, right? And so you get in these spaces that are not always welcoming in the first place. And then they start drilling down on you and you feel attacked. I've had tons of clients who feel this way. Like, I did all this work, I get in there and it's like, they're basically trying to shame me into not doing this. So I think it's helpful to understand when we're talking in finance about conservative estimates. It doesn't mean conservative in the same way that we think of politically. It just means that you want to anticipate what could go wrong. So when you're planning for your pro formas, when you're planning for the future, you have some sense of what could go wrong. So sometimes when you do pro formas, and this is what we do with our clients, you have a good, better, best scenario, right? So you have your good, which is like, I think this is how the business is going to do. You have a better, which is, let's say, my cousin agrees to work with me for 3 months without getting paid so they can save money, right? You have a best where your sales are 20% higher than what you thought they were going to be. And so you're making way more money than what you anticipated. So with performas, you want to think about kind of a good, better, best scenario. You want to think about where your expenses are and sort of how they could fluctuate and what that might mean. You want to think about any other variables that you could come up with. How much you want to pay people. Like, yeah, you want to pay everyone a living wage, $20 an hour to start, but maybe you need to have part-time people at 15 and this is their side hustle for a little bit, right? So you want to think about those different variables. When you use a pro forma, the pro forma should be in line with what you've already dreamed for your vision of your organization. So all it should be doing is telling the story of your co-op in the form of numbers. If this is a co-op, for example, let's say it's a mental health clinic and it's going to be a cooperatively run mental health clinic. You know, there's 3 of you, you know what you want to be charging clients, you know what percentage of your clients are going to pay out of pocket, or you're making a guess who's going to pay out of pocket, who you're going to submit insurance for, right? We just had that example with my therapist, Jessica, how she's billing, but she's not getting paid for 6 weeks. So you think, okay, we need to start with $25,000 in cash so that we can pay rent for 3 months and bills for 3 months, knowing it's going to take 6 weeks for money to start coming in, right? So your performance starts telling that story. Well, why does it look this way? Well, this month 1, we don't anticipate, because the insurance is not going to pay us for 6 weeks. This first month, we need this cash to pay all our bills. Month 2, that cash starts coming in from the insurance companies. So that's why you don't see revenue the first month, but you see it in the second. So all this pro forma is doing is talking about the story that you are building and your understanding of the particular market that you're entering, or the particular way that your co-op's going to operate if it's a business. It also anchors your vision to agreed upon performance goals for the co-op. So maybe 2 of the therapists are working full-time and one of the therapists is like, I don't want to do this full-time, I only want to do this part-time. Okay, maybe you all are comfortable with that, but it's going to change your revenue. Maybe you want to think about the space you're renting, and if you need as much space as what you were originally planning for, right? It gets everybody together in the co-op to help start thinking about what your shared vision is and how you want to build that out. It can also provide a new way to look at the model, and it might provide more information about strengths and challenges. Maybe you were really in love with the super cute little building that you wanted to do your therapy office in, but the rent is $900 more than this okay office that's still in the same neighborhood. And maybe you just want to paint it and make it look nicer and save that $900 a month. So it starts allowing you to rank and sort of prioritize what it is that you want to do. And then it also amplifies your vision because it creates a tool that you can share with people. It isn't just, let me have this little cup of coffee and talk to you about what I'm thinking about. It is, here is my plan. And so if you're looking at getting any kind of funding, whether it be grants, loans, capital equity from community, right? You want to have something that is more than you just sitting around chit-chatting about what it is you're going to do. Because all of us have been to the picnic where everybody's chit-chatting about what it is they're going to do. This is going from that space to telling the universe, I'm for real, and this is how I'm going to do it. And you will have to constantly be changing it, altering it, understanding what assumptions were right, understanding what assumptions were wrong. So it is something you keep coming back to, right? So it is not that different than a video game where you start at your basic level and you put something on paper. And then as you level up, the variables change, the way things operate change. And so really running a cooperative is you and the folks in the co-op figuring out how to level up. What I share with folks that I work with as clients is the goal is never to not have problems, right? We're humans in a human world. You're always going to have problems. The goal is to have better problems. And so pro forma is one of the ways you anticipate what could come at you and also how you can elevate your impact and what it is that you want to do going forward. That's what I got. That's financial tools. Thank you, Nicole. Are there any questions or anything I can answer for folks, things they're working on, any curiosities, anything I can do to support you all today? All right. Nikuli, Liana, anything else I can do to help today, or any questions that have come up during the cohort time that I can answer?
Yeah, I was just gonna say thanks, Christina, for sharing.
Mhm.
I know it was shared in the introduction, but Christina is the cooperative financer.
Yes, cooperative finance developer.
Finance developer. Thank you for
Yes.
the community partners
I'm gonna get that money. I'm gonna get that money.
for the shared ownership center. And so I think for co-ops emerging or wherever you are in your steps, Christina is a really great resource for like looking for money and what you need in order to get that money. So if you have any questions, now would be a wonderful time to ask some of that. Oh, and if you wanted to talk about the local fund, since that's
So
upcoming.
Yeah.
So that finance grants or loan?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So for either grants or loans, you're still going to have to do a pro forma and they're still going to want to see a budget. So even if the money is quote unquote free, they're going to want to know how that money is being spent and how you're tracking it. So irrespective of what you're applying for, you're still going to want to have a plan using some of these models. Anika, were you going to say something?
Hey, yeah, I did have a
Hey.
question. Hi,
Yeah.
Krista. I just want
Hi,
to
Nika.
echo to just to everyone, and also just like want to say thank you, Christina. I actually had a meeting with Christina. Christina is very accessible in terms of giving a wealth of information. I left this meeting feeling very clear about what I needed to do. And in the world of scary performers, you're real, like, the conversation is different when you're talking with lenders, when you're
Mhm.
or your documentations and your numbers. And I've seen that in terms of just like, trying to just vision board with people who are like crunching numbers.
Yep.
So I do appreciate that. And also too, it also like put like more of a better time frame of like what's possible, other than trying to just like rush towards deadlines. So but yeah, I appreciate it. I don't really have much questions. I guess like not really a question, but just around just like if there's any like technical assistance that Nexus provides or out of this North Star cohort experience. Like what are those technical assistance for some people who, may be brand new to like the developer world of performers?
Mm-hmm. Those are great questions. And thanks, Nika. I was thinking about you. It was really great to meet with you this week. Yes, technical assistance, and yes, that ties out a little bit to what Nikuli was touching on. So the Shared Ownership Center has funding for technical assistance that we bill through both City of Minneapolis and City of St. Paul. So our technical assistance we can offer in City of Minneapolis, we can offer up to 50 hours of technical assistance, and that is us starting from scratch, if that's where you all are at. Like, hey, I have this idea and I'm not sure where to go with it. Or, hey, me and these three folks, we want to do this thing. We're not sure where to go with it. We can sit down with you, learn more about your project, learn more about the skill sets of the folks that you have in your co-op with you, and then start helping you build out a plan or financials, right? So we can help you with those projections. We can help you build out that pro forma. We can help you think about maybe some expenses and some revenue that you hadn't necessarily anticipated, but that may come up. So we can do 50 hours covered by City of Minneapolis. For City of St. Paul, we have both technical assistance available, but we also have grants available. So if you are interested in starting a cooperative in the City of St. Paul, in certain neighborhoods called qualified census tracts, we can provide grants of up to $50,000 to help you start that business. That is City of St. Paul only. It's a 3-year project. and it goes through September of 2026. So I would suggest if you're interested or you want to learn more, cool, hit me up. Everybody will get a copy of my slide deck today. My contact information is in there. You can also find me on the Nexus website. And honestly, I'm just happy to talk to people. Like, I've been doing this for a really long time, and I need and want there to be safe spaces where people can just be vulnerable and say, I'm thinking about this thing and I'm not sure how to do it, or I want to support my community in this way and I'm not sure how to get at it. We're a good space to have that conversation with. And we'll be honest too, like, if it's something somebody else is doing and they're doing it better, maybe we are a conduit so you can connect with that person. So not only do we help you plan, we also serve as connectors. And so if it's not something that we can help you with, we can connect you to other folks who might be able to. And sometimes I think operating in that connector space allows folks to deepen their resources in community and build their social capital. And then they can transition that social capital to economic capital. So wherever you're at, there is opportunity. We're here to really help you figure out exactly where you are on the map and then determine the distance from where you are today to where you want to go, right? So that's really what we specialize in, and try to do it in an intentional and respectful and culturally competent way so that people feel welcome in the space and can kind of help break down some of the coded language that prevents people from feeling welcome in these spaces of finance. So that's what we're really here to do.
Christina, with so City of Minneapolis, City of St. Paul, that's like the local fund, right? And then City of Minneapolis, is that through CTAP and Elevate? Can you just talk a little about the two differences in those?
I can. So right now, only because we were really busy and we didn't apply last year. Right now, we're not doing Elevate, but it doesn't mean that we won't do it again. So Elevate is Hennepin County, and it's a similar technical assistance grant. We just didn't apply for it because we didn't use it the first year. And so we've been focused on kind of growing that. Now that we've deepened our relationship with like Denise and Acer, we've got more relationships across the county that I think would better position us to spend that money next time around. The City of Minneapolis is BTAP, and we do have those funds available. BTAP runs April, I don't know that you would need to know this, but basically April of one year through March of the next year. So we're setting up our application for this coming year, and we hope that we'll be able to support at least 4 to 5 clients. I will tell you, we'll do just a free half hour. If you just have an idea and you want to kick it around for a half hour, I'm completely down for that. It's no charge. We don't bill the county. We don't bill nobody for it. It's just getting to know you and knowing who's in the ecosystem. If you want a more detailed dig, like I have an idea and I have a budget and I want to start digging into what it will help, what I need to do in order to apply for grants, that's when we would start billing with the city and start digging in on technical assistance and using some of the financial tools we have that you can plug your numbers into to start developing a more concrete plan. So we'll talk to you for free, but if you're serious about building out a plan, we'll do some billing for technical assistance and we can help you work on that.
And go ahead.
Christina,
Yeah.
if I need to provide that BTAP service to the community that connected to me, individuals that need assistance, is there a way I can apply that grant? And in the past, I used to provide BTAP when I used to work as program coordinator for West Bank Business Association.
Oh yeah.
Lake Street Council. I worked for a lot of agencies. So
okay.
So individuals that I used to provide that services still reach out to me, but I don't have. I'm not contracted and I don't have the grant. So can you help with that?
Yes, depending on what they're doing. So I specialize and focus on technical assistance for cooperative development only. So like with Lake Street Council, they focus on small businesses, whether or not they're cooperatively based. My specialty in the area that I'm paid to focus on is cooperatives, because as a business structure, It requires certain legal framework, either an LLC that operates as a co-op or operates under 308A or 308B under cooperative statutes for the state of Minnesota. So you could send them to me, but unless they're focused on a cooperative, I won't be the right one to help them. If you just want someone that can help them navigate CTAP, BTAP, I'm willing to do that. I can give folks a half hour of my time to go through and help them figure out what the right direction to go in is. You can go to the City of Minneapolis BTAP site, and all the providers are listed. So as well as their areas of specialty. So that's another resource that I might start them on, is just going to the website and looking at the specific areas that people focus on. But as always, if you want to just send somebody to me because they think or they're not sure, I'm happy to help them navigate. That's why we're here.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
I was just gonna add, when Christina mentioned that if you have to look for a relationship outside of Nexus, that connection, that's possible too, which is also where the alumni funds for North Star come in. If there's this technical assistance that we can't provide through Nexus, then we're happy to help pay for that work too. It does take a little while to come through just because our finance systems are a little slower, but yeah, there's that. We do have an alumni fund to support this, just knowing that it's going to take a lot more to get this cooperative work moving, and the onus shouldn't just be on you. So there's that resource as well. I swear, y'all, Christina is the person to ask. I don't know how else to say it.
I appreciate you, Nicole. Thank you.
I'm glad that a couple of y'all have already met with her. That makes me really happy. Yeah, SoCan is just a really great, they have really extreme resources and like their cooperative expertise, being that they've also worked in co-ops or have been cooperative developers for like, what, 20 years? I don't know what the number comes up to when we put all three of you together. But yeah, real estate, worker co-op, investment co-ops, conversions, etc. And just also like looking at the landscape and the ecosystem, what's happening and how best to tap into those resources. This is a good place to go to.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say, and just because it's a common myth, and I feel like I know Patty touched on this too, but I can't say it enough. If you are working somewhere and your boss is like, I'm going to sell my business, let me just say, as workers, you can purchase that business, but it doesn't mean that you have to spend your own personal money to do it. So if you're in a space where you know that may be happening, rather than them just selling it to someone off the street, there is an opportunity for us to support you and provide grants for you to acquire that business. So please keep it in mind. I cannot say enough. We are the ones we have been waiting for, and everyone on this call and everyone I know is competent enough to be their own boss. And that's why we're here, to help you step into your power, to help you step into that opportunity, and to make sure that you're able to be recognized and seen as the leaders I know you already are. So that's why we're here, and we are here to help you step into your power, both economically and also in terms of entering these coded spaces. It's what we do, and it's what we're passionate about.
All right. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Yep.
Thank you, Christina.
If you
Yep.
want to see her again, we'll have her email and stuff, but just another plug. We'll definitely see a lot of her in June when we have the Black Cooperative Agenda Conference in St. Paul at
Yes.
Depot. So yeah, so please connect with Christina. Please, please, please.
Yes. Think of me as your auntie that you didn't know you had. I'm here for you. All right. Have an amazing Saturday. Thank you for your time, everybody. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.
All right. I was gonna offer that we take a short break because I know that we've taken in a lot of information. So maybe 2-3 minutes. Okay, so maybe being back at 1:23, and then we'll do a little more small groups and like. All right. So now just wanting to transition again into some small groups just to kind of process the day, what's kind of come up, and wondering if folks, well, I was thinking again, small groups of 2 or 3, just because we are smaller today. So we will have some more time to be in those small groups until about, let's say, 1:40. So that's like 17 minutes to really have some deeper conversation, and we can even hop around too. But yeah, just to really process everything. I know it can be a bit dense and heavy, but I feel like it was also great information. So those rooms will be opening up now just to have that open conversation and dialogue.
You're leading this discussion? I'm just gonna hop in when it's I can share, so I'll just.
Sure. All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope your conversations in the small groups were nice. Sorry again for if it was abrupt. Just wondering if maybe we could hear from each group kind of what were some highlights from your conversations, reflecting on today's session and just anything else that's come up. Maybe we could start with Tiny, Jennifer, and Trila's group. Anything came up for y'all that you want to share with the larger group?
All right. Okay. Closed caption. Okay. Let me see. Okay. Oh well. Let me. I got excited over the fact that they got in connection with a co-op that is similar to what they are doing. And that is kind of cool. We don't have any close by. No. So that's my little thing I'm going to say.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the. I'm
Sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I feel like a lot of the utility co-ops are mostly in rural spaces. Like just talking to Black Broadway Coalition, or there's that one that we found, but they weren't able to make the gallery walk. But yeah, a lot of them are in the rural spaces. But yeah, please go ahead.
I was gonna say that Annie was just telling us how they've been trying to get up and running for the past couple of years, and like they're trying to like build a solid foundation. As with ours is like completely different, but I will be glad as soon as they get the broadband up and going. I would like to be a customer, and I would definitely tell everybody I know about it because that's a much needed service. And then they're looking to expand, and I think Jennifer is gonna let her brother know about it. But then we were giving them some updates on our progress and everything. And so we're going to be reaching out to some more co-ops. There's an assisted living co-op. So we're going to try and get a contract with them to provide some services now that we can provide services. And then I'm linked with someone who's going to be sending me some referrals. So I'm looking to get started right away. So I'm just very excited. And then we all were talking about how we felt about like taking out a loan at this point. And then we got cut off right in the middle of when Jennifer was expressing her feelings about that. So I didn't get to hear but a couple of short words from her. So I have no idea like how she feels about taking out the loan. So there we go.
Thank you, Aini and Trila. I know we're in the larger group, but if Jennifer, if you did want to share anything here, you're more than welcome. If not, that's all right too.
Okay. I was just sharing, and I said this a little bit earlier too, that when I started a business, it was back in 1994. My sister and I started a beauty salon, and we just put our money together. It was not a thought to try to go to a financial institution and get the money. We just was like, no, we'll just do this ourselves. We started out small, and we just kind of grew from there, you know. And so fast forward to 2021-ish maybe, and I started thinking about starting this other business. I reached out and was very discouraged on some of the ways that I was treated, some of the reasons why I could not receive the loan. So it was a bit traumatic. You know, it kind of pushed me back, and I didn't really even notice until I started talking about it, maybe in the last, well, it was probably like a year later. Well, I recognized how just being told no, it was very unfair, and it just threw me off. It just threw me off, and I didn't realize it till maybe like a year later, you know, for me to kind of regroup and kind of get back out there again. So I guess in the back of my mind, I'm still like, you know what, we can do this with what we have. You know, let's just kind of get going small, very small, and then we just kind of grow from there. So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, for sure. That's really understandable too. And I think like whatever is working for your co-op, that's it. Not all the co-ops or businesses are going to take the same like route or direction, but just knowing that you still have some folks to talk to in your co-op, also outside of your co-op, if you need more guidance or direction as you get clearer about what you want to do, that's okay too. So whatever you need.
Thank you. What about Anthony, Edrance, and Tia, your group? Any highlights or things you'd like to share and talk about in the larger group?
I was just detailing about like how like my cooperative is going and stuff like that, about how things are running and how we've gotten past step 1 through step 100, you know, and you know, just the different trials and tribulations you had to go through as far as like meeting with this group and meeting with that group and filling out this form and paying this fee, and the steps of going along through that process. And we also talked about like how with the like the COGS, the cost of goods, lady was talking about earlier, and the budget and like the revenue of like what's coming into the business, and then if you're like what your business is paying is exceeding more than what your revenue is, and stuff like that, how money comes and goes through the business. So that's one thing I was talking about. So yeah.
Thank you, Anthony. Anyone else from that group want to share anything that's coming up?
Just how like the previous session before lunch flows with this one of more like preparing
how do we prepare to get the financing and funding by having that plan in place, and just really what it looks like from a co-op perspective versus an individual business owner perspective. And like before, she was mentioning worker owner and what like the options would be for equity or shares and like cost, and just seeing how that would work out. That was just it for me.
Thank you, Vince. And then Anika and Abdu, anything you all want to share in the larger group about what you talked about?
Hey, yeah, I know I can jump in. We one was just introducing each other to excuse me, introducing ourselves to each other, just around like our background, how we got to where we're at right now, overall through the cohort experience, how we've been pivoting in terms of, learning about co-ops while also, making adjustments to our business. And was also able to talk about like other resources that's out there that we either like serving on boards or have like some type of capacity around just like information. So it was good. I actually learned a lot, and we actually plan on having a meeting. So I'm excited about it.
It's just amazing, wonderful. I had amazing conversation with Anika.
Thank you. And if there's anything you want to drop for everyone or share with us so we can share, we'd be happy to help share that out. So thank you both. I'm going to pass it back to you, Nicole. Now, if you're ready. If not, okay.
Thank you. And thanks all for sharing. Before we move to surveys and close out for the day, I just want to give a reminder that part of the North Star work is doing a presentation at the end of this. So in May, we're going to have final presentations. And this is really a space for you there's a presentation guide that was sent in the email, but also in your folders that talks about this. So you can start to, if you're planning out your co-op, kind of put some of those things in there. If your co-op is already established, maybe some of the questions that you want to put together, either for funders, community you're bringing into your work, lenders, other stakeholders. It's really up to you how you want to steward that process. We'll give some more guidance on like time and everything else later. But the cooperative presentation has really been a space for you to put everything that you've learned in somewhere, or just have it for yourself or for your cooperative work. And in the past, we've also invited like alumni to kind of help ask questions in the question and discussion phase. So I'm just going to share an example from one last year. So a group called Lupine created a zine. So like I said, this is really up to you. You could have a PowerPoint, a zine, you could have a YouTube video. You could just come on here and tell us your story or what you're thinking about. But each group will essentially be asked to present something. And so they created a zine and just kind of like talked about where their work was coming from and what it was inspired by. They did a guided meditation, which was really, really beautiful. And then they talked more about what they wanted to do. I believe it was building like tiny houses in Greater Minnesota to like have for BIPOC folks to have access to housing not in the city space. And so thinking a lot about like land and nature as well as housing. So yeah, this is kind of like what they came up with. I'm just giving an example, so there's an example out there. But like I said, you can do whatever you feel called to do. If you'd like to do poetry for us, that's fine too. It's accepted. There are some guiding questions in the presentation guide that we have that basically just ask like who you're creating this for, what like some just oopsie. Oh yeah, some general big questions. Like I said, that is in your folder. We sent that in an email last year, but we'll continue to send that out. And presentations are happening in May. It's like the final session before graduation. But if you have questions about it or want to talk more about what you're thinking, what your ideas are, and these would be not individual, obviously, that before your cooperative group, so you'd all be collectively working on that. But if you did have more questions about some formats or anything else, we're more than happy to talk through that. You can just use the booking link that's in the email to make some time with us on Wednesday. And if that time does not work for you, let us know and we'll figure out another time. But I just wanted to share that example in the recording as something you could potentially do. And I'm going to pass it back to Leon.
Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna drop in the chat a survey for you all to complete just so we can get your feedback. And then I think one thing just to close as well, I kind of wanted to revisit the grounding that we did at the beginning, just maybe as a closing, like I'm curious maybe about the vision. And this could be, I know we talked about it in the grounding in that context, it was more individual, but I'd be curious maybe if there's a vision that now you're having, not just for yourself, but maybe your cooperative work and your group that you see for yourself, like after having gone through this session and just things that have come up. Maybe, yeah, just each person, if you want to come off mute or put in the chat, just like what is your vision and where do you see yourself and your cooperative group in whatever those timeframes are, 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, just to kind of bring it back to where we started, just as a closing. So feel free to take a moment to think about that, and that'll kind of be our closing before we end today. And I can also put that in the chat as well.
I can start. Yeah, I'm trying to kind of like do some housing projects. Right after like I'm already in the ULI program, Urban Line Initiative, to taking a training over there, and I'm hopeful that I will apply the Emerging Developers program through the city of St. Paul. So wish me luck.
Yes, thank you, Abdu. And it doesn't have to be like anything super elaborate. It can just be any small, big or small, vision that you all have. So no worries if you're not sure, but just
Hey,
yeah.
hey, Point. My name's Anika. My company, I guess I'm trying to have as a co-op is run like Harriet. The idea that I have is to acquire a commercial space. My big dream is to get a mixed residential and commercial. So I could probably have housing. And my goal to get to that dream is to finalize a performer.
Thank you, Anika.
Well, I can go. So I'm thinking more about taking more risk because I think that the rewards outweigh the risks that I'll be taking. We just recently got like offered to use someone else's 245D so we can actually start our day program and go along and do that, as well as the services where we don't need to be licensed under. And instead of me looking at all the things that could go wrong with, you know, working under someone else's license, I could actually give it a shot, you know. So I'm thinking about taking some more risk, and, you know, scared people can't really make money. And that's what's been like going through my head for I don't know how long. And I'm just like, okay, why not? I mean, the rest of my co-owners, they'd like to try it. They're like, yeah, we can, let's do it. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, what if they steal our money? You know, so I'm the only one that's like on the fence about it. But I'm thinking I'm gonna take more risk, and maybe we could look into some loans for working capital and stuff like that. So that's what I took away from this today. Take some risk. Just do it. That's it.
Thank you, Trayla. Anyone else like to share? You can drop it in the chat as well as we close. What your vision is that you see for yourself and your cooperative group. I think we have Edrance, Jennifer, Anthony, and Aini. If you'd like to share anything, we'd love to hear from you. If not, that's all right too.
Okay. About the beginning of the program, the grounding that we
Oh,
did.
yeah, just kind of coming back to what your vision is now that we've gone through the day. Yeah, for you or your group.
Yeah, kind of visualizing my parents. I never saw them argue. Uh, we do know that we didn't have a whole lot, but my mom was a very good negotiator. When we go to the grocery, there we have open market, just like I'm from Africa, grew up in Africa. And no matter how little money my dad gives her, she will make it work and save up. So, and then my dad was the treasurer of the church. So I see him every morning he comes home from the church every morning and count those coins and papers and recorded them and took them to the bank. So what impression that gave me as I grew up is that I have become a very detailed account keeping person. Whenever I comes to money, I know exactly where my money goes and I write it down because I don't remember stuff. And then from my mom, you know, she always have this emergency money. I have grown to have emergency money, regardless of how penniless I am. I always have that $50, $100 that I can rely on, or my children can rely on, or a friend in need, like they don't have a money for gas. I can always go and get that emergency money and help out, and I replenish it too. So that is how it has affected me as I have grown up today. And I hope that my children appreciate that. So I hope they do the same thing, have emergency money and keep track of things financially. And that I think will help my role at the broadband. Yeah, so I'm grateful for that she was able to manage, and there was no argument about money that I saw when I was growing up. But at the same time, I realized we didn't have a lot. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Aini. We've definitely had a long day with a lot of information, so I hope you'll all take time just to take space and be well. We'll see you back in a couple of weeks for governance, cooperative governance with a Black lawyer from Oakland. part of Repaired Nations. And so we're excited for that. And yeah, if there's anything in the meantime, you know how to get a hold of us. And please connect to the folks that also came to the session. And all that information will be in the post-session email. But take care and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.